I will apologize once again to those my words might offend, because I refuse to lie politely. I refuse to decorate danger. Something is coming to West Africa, and the cold has already entered the room. I call it the Black Winter. And no, this is not rhetoric. This is diagnosis. The Black Winter is not a metaphor for chaos. It is a verdict. A season where illusions die, where masks fall, where systems built on extraction begin to cannibalize themselves. It feels cold because it exposes the truth you were trained not to see. Here is the first deception we were taught, that Africa is poor because Africa failed, that instability is natural to us, that we must always be managed, supervised, rescued. I believed this once, until I asked the question they never want you to ask. Mini hook. If Africa is poor, why is everyone fighting to control it? The Black Winter is geopolitical, but it is also spiritual, because no injustice lasts forever. God does not rush, but he does not forget. History shows us this pattern again and again. Empires rot slowly, then collapse suddenly. And Africa is standing at the edge of that moment. This winter is not coming to punish Africa. It is coming to expose predators. For decades, you were fed a bedtime story, that foreign bases bring security, that foreign currency brings stability, that foreign approval brings development. Meanwhile, your resources flowed out, your leaders were selected, your voice was filtered, and your dignity was negotiated behind closed doors. Tell me, honestly, have you ever felt angry when outsiders call Africa the poor continent? Have you ever felt shame that did not belong to you? That feeling is not weakness. It is memory waking up. What they call instability is often Africans refusing to stay silent. This is why the Black Winter terrifies them. Because it forces a choice. Unity or collapse. Self-rule or permanent dependence. Truth or comfort. And those who benefit from confusion will do everything to keep Africans divided ethnically, religiously, politically, digitally. Some will call for peace while funding chaos. Some will pray for Africa's downfall while claiming God. And yes, I will say it plainly, praying for the death of your own people is not faith. It is colonization of the soul. Winter reveals who builds fires and who pours water on them. Before we continue, like this video, now if you are tired of being lied to, subscribe, because this conversation is not finished. And write this in the comments. Were you taught the wrong history about Africa, yes or no? Also, tell me, what country are you watching from? Because the Black Winter is no longer abstract. It has a face, it has a name, and it has made a move that changed everything. And to understand why this winter began now, we must confront the men they cannot control. That is where the next chapter begins. Let me ask you a question that most classrooms avoided, most textbooks softened, and most newsrooms buried. Do you think you were taught the truth about Africa's history, or a version that made someone else comfortable? Because I was taught that Africa had no systems before colonization. I was taught that order arrived on ships, that progress came with flags, that borders drawn by strangers were somehow destiny. None of that survives scrutiny. None of it survives facts. History did not begin when Europe arrived, it was interrupted. They never taught you that Africa built empires that governed millions without IMF supervision. They never taught you that Timbuktu housed universities, while Europe was still burning books. They never taught you that African trade networks financed global commerce long before Africa was labeled underdeveloped, white, unstirred, eaten. Instead, they taught you shame. They taught you silence. They taught you to accept poverty as culture and dependency as realism. If Africa was truly incapable, colonization would not have required violence. Here is the truth they avoid. Africa was not colonized because it was weak. Africa was colonized because it was valuable. Gold, uranium, oil, land, labor. Control the resources, rewrite the story. Control the story, control the mind. That is the real curriculum. And if you are watching from the diaspora, let me speak directly to you. You were taught to distance yourself. To say, I'm not like them. To prove you are acceptable. Ask yourself, why does success require disconnection from your roots? Assimilation often begins with historical amnesia. This is not about nostalgia, it is about power. Because when you believe your ancestors built nothing, you accept crumbs. When you believe Africa needs saving, you tolerate occupation. When you believe dependency is normal, you stop demanding sovereignty. God is not confused about history. Scripture tells us truth sets people free, not comfort. And lies, no matter how polite, always produce chains. So, pause here, like this video if this resonates. Subscribe if you want history without permission. And answer this in the comments, honestly. Do you believe you were taught the wrong history about Africa? Yes or no? Tell me which country you're watching from. Because once the lie about history collapses, something dangerous happens. People stop asking for approval. And when Africans stop asking for approval, power shifts. That is when the real conflict begins. In the next chapter, we confront the question they fear most: stability at any price, or self-determination, even if it costs everything. Stability or self-determination. Now, we arrive at the question they never ask honestly. The question wrapped in polite language and sold as common sense. Do you want stability at any price or self-determination, even if it costs you? Stability is often just a calm surface, hiding control. I have heard this argument my entire life. At least there is peace. At least the markets are calm. At least investors are confident. But confident in what? In extracting without resistance. In governing without consent? In deciding Africa's future from boardrooms thousands of kilometers away? Because, let me be clear, stability without dignity is not peace. It is paralysis. A cage can be quiet and still be a cage. They told us chaos would come if we questioned the rules. They told us the economy would collapse if we demanded sovereignty. They told us we were not ready. And yet, the chaos keeps coming anyway. Terrorism spreads, youth unemployment explodes, borders bleed. And somehow the answer is always more patience, never more power. Ask yourself this. Who benefits from stability when nothing improves for ordinary people? Who benefits when the same contracts renew, the same elites rotate, and the same populations remain poor inside rich nations? Fear is cheaper than reform. This is where faith matters. Because God did not design a people to exist permanently on their knees. Scripture never glorifies submission to injustice. It condemns it. Freedom always has a cost. Bondage always has an excuse. And if you are watching from the diaspora, hear this too. You are told stability is your shield. Behave, don't disrupt, don't question, don't remind them where you come from. But tell me, has silence ever protected dignity? Assimilation without power is just slow erasure. I am not calling for chaos, I am calling for choice. For Africans deciding the price they are willing to pay for freedom, instead of having the price chosen for them. Because the truth they avoid is simple. Stability that forbids self-determination is designed to last forever. So do this with me now. Like this video if you reject fear as policy. Subscribe if you believe Africans deserve the right to choose their future. And answer this in the comments, without hedging. Should Africa accept stability at any cost or self-determination, even if it demands sacrifice? Tell me where you are watching from. Because once a people chooses self-determination, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who stands in the way? Once you choose self-determination, the fog lifts. And when it lifts, you finally see the battlefield for what it really is. The struggle for Africa has never been only against forces outside the continent. It has always included betrayal from within. I used to believe Africa's suffering came only from foreign hands, from borders drawn by strangers, from currencies designed elsewhere, from wars scripted far away. But that belief was incomplete, because no system of domination survives without local permission. There are leaders who speak the language of sovereignty by day and enforce dependency by night. They wear African fabrics while signing away African futures. They quote democracy while silencing their own people. Call themselves patriots while protecting foreign interests more fiercely than the lives of those who elected them. And then there are the external actors. Calm, smiling, always concerned. Always offering advice, aid, conditions. Always warning that Africa is fragile, emotional, not ready. Yet somehow, they are always ready to extract, ready to intervene, ready to decide what stability should look like. They do not fear African poverty. They fear African unity. This is where faith cuts through illusion. Scripture is clear: a house divided cannot stand. And division has become the most profitable weapon used against Africa. Ethnic lines sharpened. Religious fear amplified. Online hatred encouraged. all while resources move quietly out the back door and blame is pushed onto the victims. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. When Africans fight Africans, who benefits? When we are distracted by internal conflict, who gains access, leverage, and control? Division is not accidental. It is strategic. To my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, hear this clearly. You were taught that Africa's problems come from culture, that corruption is in our blood, that instability is inevitable. This lie exists for one reason, to disconnect you from the truth that systems are designed, financed, and maintained, not inherited. God did not create a cursed continent. He created a contested one. So pause here. Like this video, if you refuse to blame African people for systems built to exploit them. Subscribe if you want the language, the facts, and the courage to confront both imperial pressure and internal betrayal. And answer this honestly in the comments. Who harms Africa more, external powers or internal leaders who enable them? Say it plainly. And tell me which country you are watching from. Because identifying the enemy is only the beginning. The real shock comes next. We confront what happens when Africa stops asking permission and why the world panics when Africans begin writing their own rules. There is a moment when the world's tone changes. You can hear it, you can feel it. It happens the instant Africa stops asking for permission. I have watched it happen in real time. The smiles disappear, the language hardens. Suddenly, we are no longer partners. We become a risk, a threat, a destabilizing force. Not because we failed, but because we dared to decide for ourselves. Africa is allowed to vote, but not to choose. Allowed to speak, but not to define. Allowed to exist, but not to lead. The moment Afrikaans begin writing their own rules about money, security, alliances, the panic sets in. Not panic for African lives. Panic for lost control. Think about it. For decades, we were told stability mattered more than dignity, obedience mattered more than justice, aid mattered more than sovereignty. And every time we accepted those terms, we were praised as responsible, mature, cooperative, unquote. But when Africa says, we will defend ourselves, it becomes militarization. When Africa says, we will trade with each other, it becomes isolationism. When Africa says, we will control our resources, it becomes extremism. This is not coincidence. This is conditioning. God gave human beings free will. Not conditional freedom, not supervised dignity. And any system that tells a people they are not ready to govern themselves is not protecting them, it is fearing them. Ask yourself this. If African self-rule is so dangerous, why is foreign control always profitable? Every rule Africa writes for itself breaks a contract written somewhere else. A currency clause, a security agreement, a narrative monopoly. That is why resistance comes fast, loud, unmoralized. They do not say, we are losing leverage. They say, we are worried about democracy, for novelty. But democracy without choice is theater. And I speak now, especially to those of you watching from the diaspora. You live under systems that taught you Africa must follow, not lead. That Africa must imitate, not innovate. That Africa must wait. But how long is a people supposed to wait for permission to breathe? So pause with me here. Like this video if you believe Africa has the right to write its own rules. Subscribe if you want to understand what self-determination really costs and why it terrifies powerful interests. Answer this in the comments with honesty. Should Africa accept stability at any price? Or self-rule even if it comes with sacrifice? And tell me again, which country are you watching from? Because writing new rules is only the first step. There is a moment when the battlefield changes shape. Not from bullets to peace, but from force to fracture. When open punishment becomes too costly, power shifts tactics. It stops attacking bodies and starts attacking bonds. Unity becomes the target, memory becomes the enemy. Africans are no longer confronted directly, they are turned against each other. This is not new. This is phase 2. When Africa cannot be controlled from above, it is destabilized from within. Ethnicity is sharpened. Religion is politicized. Generations are split. Diaspora is pitted against homeland. Youth are told elders betrayed them. Elders are told youth are reckless. Men are told women weaken movements. Women are told men dominate them. Fragmentation becomes strategy. Mini hook, division is cheaper than occupation. Watch the language change. Suddenly, the problem is no longer foreign pressure. It is tribalism, African corruption, African violence. The source disappears, the blame relocates, and Africans are taught to fight shadows while the hand pulling the strings stays invisible. This is how narrative warfare works. You are flooded with information, but starved of context. You are given endless opinions, but no structure. You are encouraged to argue, but never to align. Because alignment threatens systems built on extraction. And let me say this plainly. Fragmentation is not organic. It is cultivated, it is financed, it is amplified. Every internal conflict that explodes right when Africa asserts sovereignty is not coincidence. It is timing. Ask yourself this. Why does unity suddenly become dangerous the moment Africans try to practice it? Why does cooperation get labeled authoritarian? Why does self-defense get framed as aggression? Because a united Africa renegotiates everything. Currencies, security, trade, narratives. That is why the noise increases. That is why confusion is rewarded. That is why extremists on all sides are amplified, because extremes repel coalition. Mini-hook, chaos is useful when clarity is threatening. So this chapter is not a warning. It is an instruction. Do not let them choose your enemies for you. Do not let them define your identity for you. Do not let them rewrite solidarity as weakness. Disagreement is normal. Debate is healthy. But fragmentation is fatal. And now, I speak directly to you. If you repeat narratives that blame Africans for systems imposed on them, you are carrying someone else's water. If you mock unity while benefiting from division, you are playing a role assigned to you. If you stay silent while communities are turned against each other, you are not neutral, you are convenient. The greatest danger facing Africa right now is not invasion. It is disintegration. Because once a people no longer recognize themselves as one, control becomes effortless. So ask yourself, before you share, before you comment, before you react, does this build clarity or fracture it? Does this strengthen unity or feed suspicion? Does this serve truth or distraction? Your answer matters. In the final chapter, we confront the last line, the one between knowing and choosing, between awareness and responsibility, between spectatorship and action. Because history does not ask what you understood. It asks what you did once you understood. That is where this story ends, and where Africa's next chapter begins. Every time Africa stands up, the battlefield changes. Not immediately, not loudly, but deliberately. When tanks fail, narratives advance. When sanctions lose bite, division is deployed. This is the war you don't see, and it is already underway. I want you to understand something clearly. Power does not panic when Africa protests. Power panics when Africa unites. So the strategy is never only violence, it is confusion, it is fatigue. It is teaching Africans to fight each other, while outsiders watch calmly and call it internal instability. Servant, turn. This is why the first attack is always psychological. They tell you resistance is chaos. They tell you sovereignty is reckless. They tell you patience is wisdom and submission is maturity. When you repeat those words, you think you are being reasonable. In truth, you are being disarmed. I have watched this pattern repeat for decades. Ethnicity turned into a weapon. Religion twisted into suspicion, generations set against each other. Diaspora against the continent. English-speaking Afrikaans against French-speaking Afrikaans. Every fracture carefully encouraged, amplified, funded, then denied. Ask yourself this honestly. How often do you argue with another African online, while the people extracting your resources never enter the conversation? How often are we pushed to blame each other for systems we did not design? Fragmentation is not accidental. It is policy. And here is the most dangerous lie of all, that this is normal. That Africa is naturally divided, that unity is unrealistic, that discipline is authoritarian, that self-defense is extremism. Once you accept that lie, the war is already half won. This is where faith matters. Because God is not a God of confusion. Division is not divine. Fear is not wisdom. Scripture never praises a people who survive by betraying each other. God walks with those who stand in truth, even when truth is costly. So let me speak directly to you. If you are watching from Africa, do you still believe your enemy looks like your neighbor? If you are watching from the diaspora, will you support African self-rule, even when it disrupts your comfort abroad? And if you claim to love this continent, why are you silent when it is being psychologically dismantled? Pause here. Subscribe if you want clarity before the narrative shifts again. Like this video if you refuse to be mentally occupied. And write this in the comments without hiding: who benefits most when Africans are divided? Because what comes next is not about history, it is about choice. And in the next chapter, I will lay out the moment of decision, what happens when the Black Winter arrives and neutrality is no longer possible. This is the moment where pretending ends. I am not speaking to governments now. I am speaking to you, because when the Black Winter arrives, it will not knock on the doors of palaces first. It will test ordinary people, it will test convictions. It will test whether Africa has learned anything from the graves it keeps visiting. Every generation is judged by one question: when truth became inconvenient, did you stand or did you adjust? Neutrality will not exist in what is coming. Silence will be counted. Comfort will be exposed. And excuses will not survive the cold. Let me be clear, I am not calling for chaos, I am calling for clarity. The winter does not destroy those who are prepared, it exposes those who are not. History does not punish Africa for resisting. It punishes Africa for hesitating too long. You have been trained to wait for approval, to wait for investors, to wait for permission, to wait for a better time. But freedom has never arrived on schedule. It arrives when people decide the cost of submission is higher than the cost of change. Ask yourself these questions without flinching. If you were born in Africa, do you believe you were taught the truth about your own continent? Or were you trained to admire systems built on your extraction? Do you want stability at any price, or self-determination, even if it demands sacrifice? When someone calls Africa poor, does it embarrass you, or does it make you angry enough to learn why that lie survives? If you are part of the diaspora, answer this honestly. Where do you belong when Africa stands up? Do you support sovereignty only when it is polite and non-disruptive? Or will you stand with it when Western comfort becomes nervous? Were you taught that Africa must always be saved, never trusted to lead itself? And here is the hardest question of all. Who harms Africa more, the external powers who exploit it openly, or the internal leaders who trade fear for favor and sell obedience as wisdom? God does not ask us to be reckless. He asks us to be truthful. He does not promise safety to those who choose justice. He promises presence. He promises that those who walk in truth will not walk alone. So this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not after the next election, not after the next tragedy. Now. Subscribe if you refuse to be educated by propaganda after the fact. This video if you believe discomfort is a fair price for truth. And write this in the comments so it cannot be erased. Which country are you watching from, and which side of history do you choose to stand on? The Black Winter is not a threat. It is a test. And whether Africa emerges broken or reborn will depend less on speeches from leaders and more on what people like you decide to do when neutrality is no longer an option.